Okay, we continue with Zechariah chapter 8, halfway, verse 16, and this is already part 14 of our series of Zechariah. I want to read verse 16 and 17, and there it says, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak ye every man the truth to his neighbor. Execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates. And let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against his neighbor. And love no false oath. For all these are things that I hate, saith the Lord." Okay, this connects with the last verse that we read last week. Verse 15, because in verse 15, to bring it back into remembrance, it says there, God says there, I thought in these days to do well unto Jerusalem. And he says, after all that happened, now I'm going to do something different. I want to do well. That's God's wish. He wants to do well. And now he says, okay, I'm going to do well, but this is what you are going to do. He gives here sort of summary and an instruction. This is what you ought to do. And so I titled today's message True Religion. And I don't like the word religion so much because of what man made of it. And he made religion into his own way to deal with God and not God's way. But that's why I call it true religion. This is about religion the way God desires it. So the things that we read here, they should sound familiar because we found the very same things in chapter 7. In chapter 7, they were being used to show what these people's fathers, and also they themselves up to that point, had not done. So now God is saying this is what you have to do. And 4 things are mentioned, and we go over them quickly. The first thing it says here is speak the truth. Speak the truth. And we looked at truth, the word truth, what it means, emet. Truth is of great importance. And if we look today to the world, as also the Bible says, ruled by the prince of lies, then the truth is very hard to find. And the reason is that the truth, which is Jesus, is rejected. It's rejected by the world. And if you reject the truth, you end up with a bunch of lies. And that is what we see. We see that governments are lying to the people are lying to each other, and even Christians, they often think that it's okay to say a so-called white lie, or to just speak half the truth. Half the truth is also a lie. I had to think of this Hazael, the servant of Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, when we spoke about Elisha. And Hazael was sick, and so the Ben-Hadad was sick, the king of Syria. He sent Hazael to Elisha to find out whether he would get well or not. And so Elisha told him he will not die of this disease, but he will surely die. In other words, the disease will not be the cause of death, but he will die. And so Hazael went back, and what did he say to his master? He said, you will not die from this disease. Period. He left out the second part of the message. And so that was half a truth, but it was a lie. And actually, the next morning, the king died even by the hands of Hazael. So, leaving out a part of the truth turns it also into a lie. And so we see that happens all the time around us. People are, on a massive scale, misinformed on all levels. And that's means they are being lied to. So speak the truth. That is the first instruction here. And in order to speak the truth, one has to have 2 things. First of all, maybe the most important thing is sincerity. That means that you must consciously believe that what you speak is the truth. If you're not convinced of it yourself that this is the truth, then you should not speak. So that's the first thing, sincerity. This, by the way, does not prevent you from saying something wrong in error. You can in all sincerity believe something and say it, but then it turns out to be wrong. And you made an error. That's something else than lying. Lying, then you know that you're saying falsehood. So sincerity is the first thing. The second thing, and that is in order to prevent these errors, is accuracy. You need sincerity, but you need accuracy also. Accuracy means that you speak according to the fact, that you know what is right and what is not, that you know the subject that you speak about. What is the source of what I'm saying? Is it the internet? Is it hearsay? Or is it the word of God, the truth? And so if we bring it in the context of religion, religion is supposed to be, let me put it that way, because usually it's not, but unfortunately, but it is supposed to be telling biblical truth. Biblical truth. So this means do not conform to the world, because the world is full of lies. The world is ruled by the father of lies. In the world you see, it comes out more and more clear as the days go by, that facts, they don't matter. Facts don't matter. Agendas matter, but facts don't matter anymore. If we see at all the measures that are being imposed on people, they are not based on facts. They are actually based on lies. And if you speak against them, then ironically, if you do this online, there are so-called fact checkers that then establish that what you say is not true. And so they, even if you speak according to fact, then the fact checkers will say, no, this does not fit the narrative, this is not according to the agenda, and therefore it's not true. So the agenda, the ruling narrative becomes the measure, and not the facts. That is what we see happening in the world, and that shows who is in control, the father of lies. It's all lies. That's what's going on. And so we see that those sources that used to tell us at least factual things, the news, the media, they are actually becoming propaganda of an agenda, of a false narrative. If we see in another field the whole gender euphoria, it's based on lies, not on facts. The facts are very simple. They are biologically observable. That are facts. You cannot get around it, and it has been like that for thousands of years. But now, all of a sudden, the agenda has changed. The narrative has changed, and so if you would say publicly that a man cannot have a menstrual cycle, then all of a sudden you're crazy. How can you say such a thing? It's not inclusive. Or if you say that man cannot get pregnant, that is a very bad thing. Although these are simple biological facts. But they don't fit the narrative. So speak the truth is very important. And you see that what is happening now in the world, so strong, is very similar to what was happening before the Babylonian captivity. It was all lies and deception and rejection of God. And that led them into this captivity. And God reminds them of this. And now he says, so now what you have to do is you have to speak the truth. If you want me to do what I want to do, and that is to do good to you, then you must speak the truth. And what is interesting is the second thing he mentions, because this so much applies to today's world. Well, I think any day's world, but we see it so strong now because it's going the wrong direction very fast. Because the second thing he mentions is execute judgment of truth and peace in your gates. Now, this may seem a bit weird. What does it mean? Execute true judgment. We have seen it also in chapter 7. It is pertaining here to to the judicial system. So the first instruction, speak the truth, is on an individual level. But this is speaking here about the judicial system. And there must be true judgment there as well. And actually, if every individual would speak the truth, that will be so. Because who is functioning inside the judicial system? People. Witnesses, judges, lawyers. And so if everyone would speak the truth, then that would be truthful as well. But if people are not speaking the truth, then that becomes also false. And so that's a very important thing. And now you might say, how do you know it's about the judicial system? Because of this small detail at the end there, in your gates. In your gates. In the East, in those cultures in those days, the courts of justice were often held in the gates of the city. That was the place where they did this. And we have examples even in Scripture. The first one is in Genesis 19, and maybe it's not so very clear, but if you know it is so, you will recognize it, and I will have another example afterwards. Genesis 19 is where the two angels, two messengers of God, visit Sodom. They visit Lot to warn him of the impending judgment, and that he needs to get his family out of there. And it says in verse 1, and there came two angels to Sodom at even. This is another detail, but for another time. At even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. He sat where? In the gate. That's where he sat. And you would say, okay, he's just sitting there, hanging out. But no, it's not just sitting there. It were especially the elders of the city, the ones who spoke judgment, that were sitting there. And it becomes a bit more clear than later in verse 9, when the two angels, Lot invites them into his house. So that's the same evening. They are inside his house, and the people come to his house, and they are shouting and banging the door. They want these angels actually to have intercourse with them. And so they are shouting, and they say in verse 9, stand back. And then they said again, this one fellow, referring to Lot, came in to sojourn, and he will needs to be a judge. So, in other words, this is a stranger who came to live in our city, and now he has to be our judge. He has to tell us what to do and what not to do, what is good and what not. So that it was the position. He was a judge. He was judging. That's why he sat at the gate. That were usually the elders. That were people of high esteem in the city where they were, and that shows also that Lot was like that. So he must have had materialistically and in status, he must have had a good life there. He was a respected person until that moment, at least, when he did something that they didn't like. But it shows also that he was a bit double-hearted. He knew the truth, yet he condoned all this evil and sin around him. And in the midst of that, he was trying to speak true judgment. So that is one example. The other is more clear, and it's in Ruth in chapter 4. That's of course the story of Boaz. And we see there towards the end, chapter 4 is the last part, where Boaz is he wants to legally be able to have Ruth as his wife. That means that the inheritance that was given to Ruth's late husband, that would pass on to him, so that he could legally possess that inheritance, but her, moreover. And so that needed a court case to do so. So what happens in verses 1 and 2, And then went Boaz up to the gate. Now there is going to be a court case, and where do we go? We go to the gate. And set him down there, and behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by. So this is the person that actually was kinsman, family of Elimelech, Ruth's late father-in-law. And so this person would have the first right on the inheritance. So he came by, and Boaz then says, such a one, turn aside and sit down here. We're going to have a court case. And he turned aside and sat down. And then he took the men of the elders of the city. So here are the judges, the elders of the city. It's just like what Lot was. And so he took them and sit ye down here. So they were all taking their position and they sat down. And so then the whole case takes place. You can read it in chapter 4. There is even, it's sealed with a covenant. I spoke about this another time. A sandal covenant. That's one of the different covenants we have. You have blood covenant, salt covenant, sandal covenant, where the sandal or the shoe is thrown in. That's what happens there. So that means it's official. It's a legal, official, sealed deal. But it requires witnesses, and that we see in verse 11. And the people that were in the gate. So when there is a court case, of course, people come. They pass by, they call each other, come, there's something going on, and so they are all standing around there. So the people that were in the gate and the elders, they said, we are witnesses. So we witness, we testify of this, that this is true, what happened here. So you see here the whole scenario of a court case, and it happens in the gate. So that is what God refers to here when he says, speak true judgment in your gates. And finally, last example is in John 10. I also spoke about this, even in the same context at Hanukkah, because that's what it's about. In John 10, verse 23, it says, and Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. And Solomon's porch, I mentioned it back then, because after this, when you continue to read in John 10, you see that he gets into a debate with the Jews. And it is kind of an unofficial court case where two parties are pleading against each other. So that's basically what happens. And the point is, it happened in Solomon's porch. And so when you see where Solomon's porch is, in this drawing, you see it's on the east side of the temple. It is on the eastern wall. Around the eastern gate, the golden gate. That was the main entrance to the temple. That's the gate that's today it's closed. But there was Solomon's porch, so it's again at the gate. And Solomon's porch was typically the place where these kind of judicial things were settled, where the court cases were held. So you see the same thing. Jesus is going to speak against the Jews that were against him, and it happens there in Solomon's porch, the place where judgment was spoken. So it's important to recognize that this is here speaking about a judicial system. And it's, for example, I read this from my Dutch Bible, and there they left out the phrase "in your gates." And if you don't have this, and you will never come to the idea to search what it's about, of course. And, it's a very important detail. So, when the people are not truthful, then the judges are also not truthful. The whole system, the judicial system, just as a governmental system, consists of people. So, we cannot point to a judicial system or to a governmental system and say the system is bad. We can say that, but we have to acknowledge then that the reason for that is because the people are bad. In general speaking, of course. Because the system consists of people. And in a godless world, judges execute judgment of lies and not of truth. And we see that too, actually in the book Judges, the book that precedes Ruth. You see that in the very last verse, chapter 21, verse 25, It says, in those days there was no king in Israel. That statement on itself is telling there was no king. It is as if the absence of a king is the cause of the situation. Actually, the king that should rule should have been God himself. It was a theocracy. But they were drifting away from God, and there was no one, there was no king, no ruler to point them back to the right direction. So in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. That is the point. This is what happens. But at the same time, if you go to the very next verse, which is the first verse of the book of Ruth, it says, now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled. So the judges were ruling. But everyone did what was good in his own eyes. You see, that's lawlessness, when everyone does what's good in his own eyes. And that is what we see in the world today. And when you bring things to court, when you want to point to your basic rights, whether it's basic human rights or constitutional rights, you see that even the judges overrule these basic laws. So this is a very important thing. You see, by the way, also in what we spoke about last way, that there is this unbreakable link between individual faith, let's call it today individual religion, and how society functions. These things are intertwined, and it comes out. So the third thing mentioned then is, don't imagine or don't plan evil in your hearts. It speaks here about planning evil. That's what precedes executing evil. So you have to first plan it. Where do you plan it? That's what it says, in your heart. That's where it begins. So it's not a matter of acting in a certain way, because if you act in a certain way that is contrary to what you have in your heart, sooner or later you will be exposed. You cannot keep that up. So that's not the point. It's a matter of the heart. And Jesus makes that very clear in Matthew 5, when he compares the letter of the law with the spirit of the law. And he shows that all these sins that are mentioned in the law, that they happen in the heart first. And once they happen in the heart, you have already committed the sin, even if you have not acted it out. And in Matthew 15, it then says, for out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witnesses, blasphemies. These are the things that defile a man, from out of the heart. And that's why he says you have to clean first the inside of the cup. Jeremiah 17, of course, we know it says the same. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? And then in James 4, it says, purify your heart. So we have many verses, there are many more. If you just do a search on the word heart, you will see that it comes back many times in the Bible in this specific context as the source of evil, the source of sins. That means that our heart needs to be changed, or actually even replaced, as it is said by the prophets of old. That God says, I will take out this heart of stone and put in a heart of flesh. It has to come from the inside out, and that can only happen when the Holy Spirit of God indwells us. Then this transformation from the inside out can take place. We must be born again. That's what Jesus says in John 3. And that begins by submitting our hearts to Him. We have to take our heart and say, here, it's yours. Do what is necessary. As long as we hold on to it, even a small part, it's not going to happen. So that's a very important thing. You cannot speak the truth. You will not have truthful judgment if the heart and the hearts of men are wicked, are evil. And the third thing, and you see that all of this is connected, love no false oath. Love no false oath. That means do not bind yourself to a false oath. I said also the last time, God is a God of covenants. This is how he began with Abraham, and this is how it continued. And we see, of course, Jesus is also making a covenant. When he says, "This is the blood of the new covenant." So you make an oath, as it were. And God says, "Love no false oath," because what will Satan do? He will make men make oaths with him and his minions. And you see it everywhere in secret societies and even in gangs. They make an oath so that they are bound to this evil that is being perpetrated. They have given with that legal authority to the enemy to come and use them, for demons to come into their lives, etc. It's legal authority. You see here very much, also last week, that there is this legal system, this judicial system of men, but you see that is a reflection of God's system of making a covenant, even sealing it with his own blood. So he says, "Do this only with me, but not with anyone else." Because what does he say? "I hate this." It's a very evil thing. We see it in James 5 in verse 12. There is also said, "Above all things." That makes it a thing of high importance, high priority. "Above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath. But let your yea be yea, and your nay be nay, lest you fall into condemnation." So this is really an important thing. We don't really realize it so often. But it shows two things. First of all, literally what it says, do not make a false oath, do not swear by anything. That's one side, and the other side is to make this covenant, to go into this covenant with God. And once you're in that, you exclude all the other things. But it's a very important thing, because this is what Satan will tempt people to do, to make an oath, to swear by things. And God says, "I hate these things. All these things I hate." So that is in a very short 4-step instruction of what God wants the people to do. He says, "I'm going to change because you are going to change, because you are going to do these and these things. This is what I desire." Now, what is the result of this? What is the result of this? So this conduct, this change of heart, this behavior, how does it manifest itself? And we find this also. 3 things are mentioned. The first thing is in verse 18 and 19 of Zechariah 8. "And the word of the Lord of hosts came unto me, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the fast of the 4th month, and the fast of the 5th, and the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th shall be to the house of Judah joy and gladness, and cheerful feasts. Therefore love the truth and peace." Now, this may seem a bit strange, but again, it should also remind us of what we read in chapter 7. Remember these people that were left behind or stayed behind actually on their own free will. They stayed behind in Babylon. They sent this request to the priests to whether they could stop with this fasting. And basically the reason was that they didn't like it. They had already rejected so many things of God and they wanted also to get rid of this. That was basically what it was about. And now God says they will become cheerful feasts. They will become joy and gladness. What does it mean? That if this change of heart take place, that there will be a renewed joy in let's say, religious activity, religious ordinances. But when I, in this context today, use the word religion, don't think of earthly religion like Catholicism or Protestantism or whatever. I'm speaking about religious or religion from a biblical point of view. It's joy in reading the Bible. It's joy in praying. It's joy in having fellowship. These things will create renewed, you will have renewed joy in them. And so God mentions these things, these fasts, because this was one of the pain points of the issue here. These people understood very well what God was saying. They understood that actually they didn't like it because they had turned away from God. They were actually following anything but the truth. And so God promises here, He says this will happen. When you do these things, you will see they shall be to the house of Judah joy and gladness. He promises it. This is what's going to happen. This is the automatic result. And maybe you recognize it in your own life when there are maybe or have been periods or days that you don't feel like reading the Bible. You don't feel like praying. You don't feel like going to church or being in fellowship. You just don't want to do it. That means that something's wrong in your relationship with God. It's a logic thing. And so the other way around is the same. When this relationship is good and is healthy, then you will have joy in these things. And you can bring it to a simple human level. If you're in a relationship with a person, then you want to be with this person. You want to do things together. You want to spend time together, etc. If you don't like the person, then obviously you don't want to be with this person. You rather go on your own somewhere. So it's something all of us can understand. So increased and renewed pleasure in religious ordinances. That is one of the first things that will result from this changed heart. The second thing is mentioned in Zechariah 8 verse 20 and 20 through 22. Thus said the Lord of hosts, it shall yet come to pass that there shall come people and the inhabitants of many cities, and the inhabitants of one city shall go to another, saying, let us go speedily to pray before the Lord, and to seek the Lord of hosts. I will go also. Yeah, many people and strong nations shall come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem, and to pray before the Lord. Here we see that true religion will attract others. That is what it describes here. Many will come from all kinds of nations and places. They will all come and say, let's go quickly. We want to be part of this. Something's happening here that we want to be part of. That is exactly what salt does in food. It makes a difference. And that's what light does in the darkness. It makes a difference. And it will draw the attention of others. So that's right away you can ask yourself, does my religion, does my faith attract others? Does it cause curiosity in others? It's a question you can ask yourself, and if not, maybe something needs to change. This attraction, because here if we read this literally, you say, yeah, but this is people going up to Jerusalem. It has nothing to do with Christianity. So, but what it says is Jerusalem was the center of the presence of God was there. And so this was the focal point. So going up to Jerusalem means to go and worship God. And that is also the reason why God gave these pilgrim feasts in Deuteronomy 16, where 3 times a year the Jews went up to Jerusalem from all the country and the outside of the country. They came from all around in the entire region. They went to Jerusalem, and you can imagine seeing people packed with whatever they needed for the journey, walking through through the country, all going in the same direction. And as they were getting closer to Jerusalem, these groups would grow in size, because more and more joined. And those that were maybe not interested would see them pass by and say, hey, I'm curious, what are they going to do? What is this all about, and why are they doing this? And so it will attract others. It's a visual thing of what should happen spiritually, of course. And we see even in the millennium, and we will see it later in Zechariah chapter 14, that this continues when Jesus is on the earth and he rules from Jerusalem. We will see exactly that. People will go to Jerusalem. They want to know what is this all about. So this is what true religion, true faith should do. It should work like a magnet and attract others. We should provoke others to be part of this. And it is often not a matter of doing things specifically, but it's a matter of the heart, as we said before. It's a matter of the general conduct, how you live, how you respond to the world around you, etc. And interesting here is that it says that the people say to each other, let us go speedily to pray before the Lord. So you see also this quickly. There's no time to lose. When you want to be part of something, you're not going to waste time. You're going after it speedily. So that's the second thing. The third thing, and it's the last verse of this chapter, verse 23. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take hold out of all languages of the nations, even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Jew, saying, we will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. Now this is maybe not so clear what is meant here, but this is a prophecy about Jesus. And it speaks here about a desire to follow Jesus. And this is really the ultimate thing that true religion should bring about. The desire to follow Jesus. The desire to cling to Jesus. If religion or faith does not do that, it has failed. You can have the most wonderful church buildings and organization and events and congresses and conferences, whatever. But if the result is not that it will cause people to cling to Jesus, it has failed. It has failed. This is the most important thing. So it's maybe not so clear at first that this is a prophecy about Jesus the Messiah. And this verse has caused lots of confusion, and it's doing so even today, because there are rabbis, and even, I have to say, so-called messianic rabbis that use this verse to say, see, the Christians and people in general, they have to hold on to the Jews. They have to take hold of the skirt of a Jew. So they have to come under the rabbinical rule before the final redemption of Israel can take place and the Messiah can rule on this earth, etc. They use this verse to say this, because it says, see, all the people from all the nations and all languages, they shall take hold of the skirt of a Jew. That's what it says. Well, that's what it looks like. Rabbinical Judaism in Zechariah's days, it was just beginning to come into existence. A big part of it has its roots in Babylon. So the people part of the people that wanted to stop with this fasting were actually the ones that were building this new religion. Rabbinical Judaism was just developing, and a few hundred years later, 500 years later, in Jesus' days, it was fully established. And we see from the New Testament that it was exactly that thing that Jesus was continuously clashing with. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes. And the first thing where Jesus went to preach the gospel of the kingdom was in the synagogues. Why? Because they didn't have the gospel of the kingdom. They missed the whole thing so far. The Messiah was there and they didn't see it. Although they had all the oracles, as Paul writes to the Romans. So, clearly, they were not the correct religion in that respect. So the confusion here begins with the word Jew. And you see it here in King James, and most translations will say Jew. And it is not wrong in itself. The only thing is that what is meant by Jew. And that has become so blurry even today. most of the time, and in our minds, when we hear Jew, it is associated with the Jewish religion, with rabbinical Judaism. And we think of rabbis and of synagogues and all these things. But in the biblical context, it's not speaking about that. And even in Zechariah's days, that did not even exist yet in this form. So that's obviously not what is being meant. The other thing that might come to mind when you hear the word Jew is an Israelite. And that is also not so strong here in Zechariah's time, because they were scattered actually. They were partly still in Babylon, Persia at that time, but also in other regions, in Egypt, in Moab, and they were everywhere. So they were, you can say they were Israelites, but they were also scattered. So it's not so much that a Jew has actually, in the biblical context, it has not to do with being a Israelite of nationality or ethnicity. It is. We looked at the word in the past. It is Yahudim. So Yah, of course, Yahweh. Dim is the plural word of Adam. Adam being man. Adim is many men, or mankind, you can say. Peoples. And who connects them? So it's peoples of God. That's what it says. Peoples of God. And that has, obviously, if you see the term, it doesn't speak about ethnicity or about nationality. It's just people of God. Another word that we know is Hebrews. That has another root or another origin. Noah had 3 sons, as we know. One of them was Shem, and the great-grandson of Shem was Eber. So Noah was the 10th generation from Adam, Shem obviously the 11th, and Eber was the 14th. And Eber is from which we get the word Hebrew. So all the descendants of Eber are Hebrews. Ivrit is the word in Hebrew, Ivrit, Hebrews. So these were descendants of Eber. Why? Because Eber, as I said, was the 14th from Adam, and then the 19th, so the great-great-grandson of Eber, was Terah. And Terah was the father of Abraham. Abraham is the 20th from Adam. So through the Hebrews are all those that come from Abraham. That's where we get this word. But obviously that was long before Jacob. Israel lived, and long before there were 12 tribes, long before they came into the promised land. So there was no land of Israel yet. There was no nation of Israel. There were no 12 tribes. Nothing of that. So you see that this word has not to do with ethnicity, with a certain geographical region. It is from all before that. So what is it then? If we look at the words used here in Zechariah, and I wrote it down, it's Yahudi Aish. Yahudi Aish. So what does it mean? Aish or Ish means man, which is a singular plural, a singular masculine word. So it is one man. Specifically saying one man, Yahudi. So a man of Judah, that's what it says. Yahudi means, you can translate it with Jew, but if you write it like this in Hebrew, it means a Judean. That would be the better translation. So instead of saying Jew, it would be better to say a Judean, or a man of Judah. One specific man. So it's not the nations will grab hold of Jews in general, a Jew as being a general expression, but they will take hold of a specific man from Judah, a specific Judean. So that makes it quite different. Because we know who this man from Judah was, this Judean. other prophecies show this, speak about this. It links obviously to Yeshua. He was a Jew, to use this word again, by nation. So if you want to use the meaning by nation as being an Israelite, he was. He was also a Jew as being from the tribe of Judah, the line of King David. So he was also a Jew in that respect. Therefore he was a Judean. He was also from Judah, the region. He was also called the Lion of Judah. This is all Old Testament, so also the rabbis can know this if they want to see it. In Hosea 5 and also in Genesis 49, it speaks about the scepter of Judah and the Lion of Judah, Ariel Yehudah. So it's clear, it's not speaking about a Jewish lion, it's speaking about the Lion of Judah. So if you translate it in one point as this way, you should do this consistently. But anyway, so and he was a Jew by language. He was a Jew by he was under Jewish law. We see even his trial was before the synagogue first. He was under Jewish law. This is where he got convicted falsely, but still for blasphemy by the high priest, by Caiaphas and Annas. And in his time he was also recognized as a Jew. In the story in John 4, where he goes to the well and he meets this Samaritan woman, the dialogue is very clear that this woman from Samaria recognizes Jesus as a Jew. So in John 4 verse 9 it says, then said the woman of Samaria unto him, how is it that thou, speaking to Jesus, that thou being a Jew askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. So she doesn't know Jesus, she doesn't know who he is, but she sees right away that he's Jew. So he was from language and appearance, he was a Jew, or rather a Judean, a man from Judah, or Judea. He was not part of the rabbinical class at all. As I said before, he was actually clashing with them all the time. So he was. It is on every level wrong what the rabbis say, that the nations, the people from the nations, must cling onto a Jew. In other words, come under rabbinical rule before the redemption can take place. It's so wrong. But anyway, what is of course more troubling is that even so-called Messianic Jews say this, and that many Christians therefore become sort of semi-Jews in their whole conduct and all the things that they do. It's sad, but anyway. And then it says, but 10 men, I think 10 men from the nations. Now, you would say, why 10? This is an idiom, it's a way of speaking. It means many. So instead of saying many, they often said 10. This is just a way of an expression in the language. So this should not be taken literally. It just means many. And then there is this other thing. What do? They want to take hold of the skirt. You think, what is this now? Again, this is part of the culture in those days. If you would take hold, literally hold on to the skirt, to the garment of someone, this would mean that you want to take part in the privileges that this person has. So if you would, which you couldn't, but if you would take hold of the garment of the king, which was of course not done, but if you would do so, this means you would take part of the privileges of the king. Or as a student, when you would hold on to the garment of your master, your rabbi, your teacher, then it means you want to take part in his privileges, be united with him in fellowship. You can say becoming one with him, sort of. So it's a quite intimate way of approaching someone. And again, this we can also find in Scripture, but it's maybe not so clear. But one verse that I thought of was in Isaiah 4, verse 1, where it says, in that day, speaking about the latter days, in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man. This 7 women, they refer to the 7 churches that we find in Revelation 2 and 3. And we see they take hold of the skirt. It doesn't say here, but they take hold of one man. By the way, one man here is also Aish. It's the same word as we find in Zechariah. So it's curious that in Isaiah it says one man, and in Isaiah it says a Jew, and not a Jewish man. That would make quite a difference. But okay. Anyway, so these 7 women, these 7 churches, they all take hold of one man. Who is this one man? It's the same one man, Jesus. Because they are all Christian churches. They are all they claim to be Christian churches. So we see the same thing. They take hold of him because they want to be to take part in the privileges, share in his privileges. And then the word for skirt, I wrote it also down, because the rabbis that use this verse, they will say that's the tzitzit, these cords that are on the Jewish clothing. That's what they will say. But if you read the Hebrew verse, it does not say tzitzit, although the word existed. It says kanaf. It's this word. And so they translated it here with skirt. Kanaf means the outer edge, the hem, the edge of the garment. It can also mean wing of a bird, but also the wing as the sleeve. So it's really the outer edge, because it's like you follow someone that you want to be with and you grab his garment. Usually you get the outer edge. So that's what it refers to. And we have examples of that. Quite a few. So I want to read a few so that we understand what it's about, and that it is not about tzitzit of religious Jews. In Matthew 9, verse 20 and 21, it says, "And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, If I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole." So this woman wanted to only touch the hem of his garment. That's the outer edge, the rim. She wants to touch it because why? By touching the garment, and again this is in the culture. The woman did not make this up. This was already something that was in the culture. Touching the garment makes you share in the privileges of this person. So if this person, in this case Jesus the Messiah, has the power to heal, only touching his garment would allow you to share in this, and in this case for this woman to be healed. It's not magic or something, it's just the way it was known in this culture. In Matthew 14, verse 35, 36, it says, "And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent out into all that country round about, and brought unto him all that were diseased, and besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment. And as many as touched were made perfectly whole." So you see the same thing. They only touched the hem of the garment, the skirt, the kanaf. It's exactly what it says in Zechariah, the outer edge of the garment. They only touch this, and they share in the privileges in this case, the healing power of the Messiah. In Luke 6 verse 19, same thing. And the whole multitude sought to touch him, for there went virtue out of him and healed them all. And in verse 8, Luke 8 verse 46, it's the same that we read from Matthew, this woman that wanted to touch him. But here we see it from the perspective of Jesus. Jesus said, "Somebody has touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me." So the people receive this healing power, but Jesus also feels it flowing from him, only because they touched the hem of the garment. So that is what it shows. And that is what true religion should provoke people to have the desire to, if it's possible, even only touch the hem of the garment of Jesus. They want to cling to Jesus. They want to follow him in whatever possible way. That is the desire that should be provoked in others by our religion, by our faith. And why do they want to do that? It is also said there in Zechariah 8 verse 23, "For we have heard that God is with you." Because God is with him, through him we can get to God. And actually only through him we can get to God. So that's why they want to touch the hem of the garment. True religion will draw people to Jesus. The last example of this is in Song of Solomon. And that is indeed speaking about the tribulation. So you could link it to these 10 men, indeed. Because the examples I just read from Matthew and Luke, one could say, well, this has been fulfilled in the past and that's over. No, it's not over. It's the same now. We should provoke others to run after Jesus and to want to share in the privileges that he brings, and to be united in fellowship with him. So here we see it in the tribulation, and it's in Song of Solomon, it's the bride that goes out to search her groom, and it's of course this part of the bride that did not open the door when he was there. And so what you see as he goes out into to the city, and there she finds the daughters of Jerusalem. Now remember, a few weeks ago we had also this term daughters of a few times in Zechariah 8, or in Zechariah, I think chapter 6 was. Daughters means the remnant of, the children of. So it's later generations, somewhere in the latter days. So it's here the same. So the bride searching her groom, and she meets the daughters of Jerusalem. So these are Christian believers that were too late to open the door to the Messiah. So you see, this is in the tribulation. They are not they have not been part of the rapture, but they are crazy. They want to be with Jesus. So they go out. They meet the daughters of Jerusalem, and they say, "If you find my beloved, that you tell him that I am sick of love." So that's what they tell. And then there comes the response. You see now that their behavior, their faith, their passion for their Messiah is so telling that it provokes something in the daughters of Jerusalem. And it's ironic, if you think who the daughters of Jerusalem are, then it is the exact opposite of what how the rabbis explain Zechariah 8 verse 23. They say that people from all nations will cling unto a Jew before redemption can take place. Here you see the exact opposite. It's the daughters of Jerusalem, Jews if you will, that actually see the bride, which is those from all nations. And what do they say? "What is thy beloved more than another beloved? O thou fairest among women. What is thy beloved more than another beloved, that thou dost so charge us?" So they say, what is this groom, this Messiah? That's what we speak about. What is so special about him? And then they say, "Thou fairest among women." This bride is the most beautiful of all the women. Why is he the most beautiful? Because he is the bride of the groom. What she radiates is provoking curiosity in them. What is thou, beloved, more than another one, that thou dost charge us? And they want to know now also who this man is. True religion must eventually do this. It begins with speaking truth, and it becomes complete when we provoke others to run after Jesus. To run after Jesus. And that is that one man from Judah, that Yehudi Eish or Ariel Yehuda, Yeshua HaMashiach. We must keep our eyes on him, because he is the truth. Only when we keep our eyes fixed on him, we can indeed also speak the truth and discern the lies. So that's one thing we must do, and we must follow him, so that others will say, where is this person going? What is this person doing? Let's speedily follow and try to get a hold of this Messiah as well. Amen.